Hello, welcome to Diplomatic Briefing. We discuss recent interactions between Chinese and American military and diplomatic officials. The US makes small moves behind the scenes. Mexico is planning to target cars and other products produced in China and some other Asian exporting countries, imposing tariffs as high as 50%. Foreign media have analyzed that this is meant to pressure US President Trump into giving in. In response to related questions, Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian said that China has always advocated for inclusive and universally beneficial economic globalization and opposes all forms of unilateralism, protectionism, as well as discriminatory and exclusionary measures. China firmly opposes any restrictions imposed on China under various pretexts due to coercion by others, which harm the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese parties. Lin Jian stated that China will resolutely safeguard its own interests based on the actual situation. He said that China and Mexico are both important members of the Global South, and mutually beneficial cooperation is the essential feature of China-Mexico economic and trade relations. China attaches great importance to the development of China-Mexico relations and hopes that Mexico will work together with China to jointly promote the recovery of the world economy and the development of global trade, according to foreign media reports. The Mexican government estimates that it will raise tariffs on key imported goods from countries with which it has not signed trade agreements in order to boost domestic industries and reduce reliance on imports from Asia. Mexican Minister of Economy Ebrard also said that they are seeking to increase the tariff rate on Asian-made automobiles to as high as 50%. As China is Mexico's largest source of imported automobiles, it will be directly affected. Currently, Mexico's import tariffs on Chinese light vehicles range from 15% to 20%. Reuters cited analysts as saying that this tax hike by Mexico is seen as a response to pressure from the United States aimed at appeasing the Trump administration's trade threats. Recently, Trump has repeatedly urged Mexico to follow the U.S. example and impose additional tariffs on Chinese imports. According to a Xinhua news agency report on September 11th, Mexican President Sheinbaum recently stated in Mexico City that Mexico is willing to work hand-in-hand with China to continuously elevate the level of bilateral relations. In an interview with China's new ambassador, when Chinese Ambassador Chen Daojiang presented his credentials, he spoke highly of Mexico-China relations, stating the two countries achieved fruitful cooperation across various fields, including trade and economy. Mexico is willing to work with China to continuously promote bilateral relations. In summary, the Mexican market is highly dependent on the United States and cannot compete. But if Mexico imposes heavy tariffs on Chinese products, the first to be affected will be themselves. Mexico will bear the brunt, facing inflationary pressures that will significantly impact its economy and people's livelihoods. On one hand, Chinese companies' profits will certainly be affected, but on the other, the impact on the U.S. auto manufacturing industry will also be considerable, because American car companies have long taken advantage of the USMCA trade agreement to split up automobile manufacturing processes at the U.S.-Mexico border, shuttling components back and forth between the two countries to effectively launder Chinese-made parts shipped to Mexico, ultimately assembling them into cars labeled as Made in America. Therefore, Mexico's tariff hike this time not only affects bilateral relations between China and Mexico, but is also part of the broader China-US rivalry and even a contest between American companies and Trump. In addition, according to a Bloomberg report on September 10th, several sources revealed that NASA has now banned Chinese citizens holding U.S. visas from participating in its projects. The report states that although NASA has always had certain restrictions on hiring Chinese citizens, up until now, Chinese citizens with U.S. visas, working as contractors, graduate students, or university scientists, have still been able to collaborate with NASA institutions. However, sources told Bloomberg that on September 5th, some Chinese companies working with NASA were denied access to the agency's data systems and were prohibited from attending work-related meetings, whether in person or online. Bloomberg noted that when NASA implemented this series of restrictions, NASA is also facing multiple upheavals this year, having experienced both staff and budget cuts, as well as growing skepticism within American society about the direction of its space exploration programs. At the same time, all NASA employees are becoming increasingly anxious over the narrative that China may beat the US to the moon. According to a report by Space.com, during a Senate Commerce Committee hearing in September, American experts sounded the alarm over the US-China space race. The experts present pointed out that China's core advantages are that the Chinese government's core advantage lies in having clear objectives and unified actions for its lunar mission framework, whereas the United States faces the problem of policy reversals due to changes in administration. This has harmed space missions that span decades or even generations. In fact, the US has always excluded China from its space station projects. However, times have changed. As China has made continuous progress in the space field in recent years, the United States' self-imposed isolation is actually shooting itself in the foot. Although the United States often engages in petty maneuvers, for Trump and American politicians, anti-China issues are not their main concern at the moment. On September 10th, the American conservative political activist Charlie Kirk was shot and killed while giving a speech at a university in Utah, an event that shocked the United States political scene. As Kirk's close ally, President Trump immediately ordered flags to be flown at half-mast across the United States in mourning. Kirk was a well-known right-wing activist in the United States and founded Turning Point USA, the largest conservative youth organization in the country. At the time of the incident, Kirk was sitting in the middle of an outdoor stage, interacting with several hundred audience members when gunshots suddenly rang out at the scene. Kirk was shot in the neck. The New York Times published an article pointing out that, unlike other violent periods in American history, we are now in an era of highly developed networks where cameras can easily capture footage of these incidents and spread rapidly online. At the scene of Anki's speech, many audience members used their phones to record his remarks, but they never expected that they would end up capturing a political act of violence. The New York Times reported that the suspect's motive is still unclear, but this incident suggests that acts of violence against politicians have almost become a brutal norm in American society. The huge political divide between the two parties has raised concerns among many experts. They warn that regardless of the shooter's motive, in the current climate of deepening division and escalating tensions in American society, Kirk's death could also trigger new acts of violence. In the face of frequent incidents of political violence, many American political figures have called on all sides to exercise restraint. Former Democratic Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, who was herself shot, said that America cannot become a country that responds to differences with violence. She said that both the Democratic and Republican parties are targets of political violence, and that meaningful action should be taken to prevent gun crimes from claiming more lives. Meanwhile, a commentary from Politico noted that attacks on politicians are followed by condemnation, calls for reflection, and vows to stop the violence, but before long, violent incidents happen again. This kind of vicious cycle has become a chilling American ritual. The violence that has seeped into American politics reflects the deep divisions within American society and the growing distrust towards social institutions. The Wall Street Journal cited a report from U.S. Capitol Police stating that last year, there were nearly 9,500 threats and alarming statements directed at U.S. members of Congress, their families and staff, up from about 8,000 the previous year. In 2017, this number was less than 4,000. The U.S. Marshal Service stated that American judges and prosecutors have also become targets of attacks. In the fiscal year up to September 2023, there were 457 threats against federal judges. Time magazine described the shooting as shocking for Kirk's allies, who worry that it signals an even worse future. The Republican Party, Congresswoman Anna Paulina Luna, was once a member of Turning Point USA, the organization founded by Kirk. She said, "Unfortunately, I don't think this will be the last time. That's what makes these incidents so frightening. Acts of political violence in America are often not isolated events. For example, after Martin Luther King, the leader of the Black Civil Rights Movement, was assassinated in the 1960s, riots quickly broke out across the United States. After Giffords was shot, the atmosphere of paranoia and distrust in American politics intensified. The 2021 Capitol Hill riot not only reflected the dissatisfaction of Republican supporters, but also enraged Democratic supporters. The latest issue of Time magazine in the United States featured a blood red filter on its cover for this incident and wrote a big save on it. Time magazine pointed out that Kirk's sudden public prediction of his own death may not just be a tragedy for America. Political violence often triggers a chain reaction. Kirk's death could become a catalyst that radicalizes even more Americans, making the political environment in the United States increasingly dangerous. Fox News anchor Kane, when announcing Kirk's death, bluntly stated, "As a news program, I don't know where we go from here in America. I also don't know which direction we will head in." To sum up simply, American society has already become deeply divided. The two-party elections, politics has only amplified this division, and political figures like Kirk who are on the far right. For various reasons, they oppose gun control and have even advocated for it. He even claimed that some people being shot is worth it. The final irony is that while he defended Americans' right to bear arms and protected the interests of the gun industry, he himself ended up dying in the very predicament created by gun violence, which can only be described as ironic. Some American experts have analyzed that America is truly sick and Trump is at the center of it. When bullying weaker countries abroad, shouldn't the chaos within American society be addressed first?